Welcome to the Perspective Podcast, where we embrace open dialogue from different perspectives about entrepreneurship, relationships, and education.
And this open dialogue is needed, especially today, as we live in a Twitter finger society where everyone seems to care more about getting their point across than they are about hearing the other person's perspective.
If you're ready to grow your business, your relationships, and your personal development, stick with us here at the Perspective Podcast, because sometimes in life, to get to the next level, you just need a different perspective.
If I look like what I've been through, I'd be roadkill. Tell me off of the pavement, I'm reeking from the...
Guys, welcome to another episode of the Perspective Podcast. I'm C. Mouzon. I got T here with me. Say what's up, T.
What's going on, family? Bang, bang.
Bang, bang.
I got a gang bang earlier this time.
We got it in early and you'll get it in later, right? It's all about the bang, bang. Guys, welcome. We are here, another episode. We appreciate all of you that continue to join us, continue to share the message, continue to reach out to us and share your perspective. This week, we got another guest on, and this one's going to be a good one. We're going to revisit some topics, or a topic that we had hit on very early in the podcast. But now we're back to have a little bit more of this perspective conversation around entrepreneurship versus intrapreneurship. And if that is even a thing, it doesn't even sound like a word, but we'll get there. And so, T, I'm gonna let you introduce our guest for the day.
Well, I am super excited for this guest. If you've been following along, which a lot of you have been, I've been talking about this guest over and over and over again about all the things that I'm learning and the excitement and the escape that was brought light to me. That's why I have the background, the new sunset, like the sunrise on the beach here for new beginnings. But we got none other than my new CEO, who I've been raving about on and on the podcast and off camera as well. Chris Donnelly here from Donnelly's Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing in Lansdale, Pennsylvania. So I'm super excited. I feel like we have a podcast in our office. Like we just don't record how much we talk about business and different things and philosophy and the economy and just global economics. And so we finally got him on the podcast. I'm super excited. So Chris, if you don't mind, introduce yourself to our folks and let's get into this topic, which I know you're pretty passionate about.
Yeah, thanks, Terell. My name's Chris Donnelly. This is probably the only intro that I've ever gotten, by the way. I don't think I've ever gotten another intro before. So well done, my friend. Well done. I like it. I don't know kind of where to start. I mean, I have a long and varied history doing a bunch of different things. I started, I guess I graduated high school, joined the Navy, and then I had some experiences overseas and came back and I worked in customer service for Donnelly's for my father. And I did that for maybe like 5 years. And then I thought I was going to go back into the military, and I went through this whole thing where I was training and preparing, and then I realized that like I'm way too much of a free thinker to actually go like live by these rigid rules again. And so I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And I had a roommate who his father was a part of Salomon Brothers back in the 60s, and I talked to him one day, and he gave me the whole like gouge on like, here's how you get into Wall Street. And like I did it and it worked. and so it was pretty cool. So I ended up in Citibank's transaction management group, which is down in Delaware. And then from there, I moved to New York, and I was working in a global banking unit that was focused on doing all kinds of capital raising for huge global scale businesses and subsidiaries that were here in the US. So there's companies like Volvo and Nestle and things like that, right? 2013, my father approached me. He was like, hey, I want to retire in a couple of years. Maybe you want to come back and buy this business. And I'm thinking that at the time, like, I want to have my own business. I want to be an entrepreneur. So yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And like I did the calculation as a good investment banker would do. And it seemed that it was kind of net positive. So I took the jump, and now here we are in 2022. I've been doing this it's been my business since early 2017. We're starting to bring some really great people on board, Terell included, and yeah, I think we're starting to take off.
That's awesome. I want to jump in, Chris, because I'm always fascinated with people that get into entrepreneurship, that become entrepreneurs, that go that direction. Your dad owned the business while you were growing up?
Yes.
So what made you go to the Navy as the first jump? Did you always think you wanted to be an entrepreneur at some point? Like, how was that? How were you brought up in that way?
No, well, definitely it was nice having parents who were entrepreneurs, and because we had good things, like we had lots of opportunity because of it, right? And I think that's one of the key things is that, like, people that do own their own businesses, people that take that risk, they're able to they get some reward from it in the form of flexibility, and I think this is often overlooked, right? And like, aside from monetary purposes, right? Like I think you gain some kind of flexibility when you own your own business, and if you do it the right way. And I had no kind of intentions back then of ever doing it. I don't know, Terell could tell you, I'm kind of like this like wide angle thinker. Like I don't like, it's weird to say, like, I don't really think about like, oh, well, I think I want to go do this. Like, I think about concepts and how I might apply those concepts. And then that kind of gets me into things. And then I start from the top of all the possibilities, and I kind of like narrow it down. So it wasn't until I was at Citi, and I kind of saw how business worked and thought it was pretty neat that I said, and by then I was kind of realizing that I'm not a real big fan of rigidity, and I just wasn't having problems, but like, why do we always have to do it this way? Why? And that's kind of like a common theme in my life, is that I find myself asking why are we doing this? 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 And I guess that's what kind of leads there, is that people that become entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, because I think they're both the same, they're constantly asking themselves why, like, why is this way? They're almost like scientists, right? And that's kind of what drives them.
Yeah. It's huge, and I
think that. Go ahead, Chris. I
mean, it goes into what we're about to talk about, because I think that asking that question, why, diving deeper, uncovering layers, not living by the status quo. I believe that, like, yeah, that is the trait of the entrepreneur, right? I believe that. Now, Chris, you said that they're kind of the same thing, right? The intrapreneur, the entrepreneur. I would beg to differ, because and maybe we start and maybe Chris, we go down this definition of what is your definition of an intrapreneur, or what's your definition of an entrepreneur. Let's start there.
Well, Mouzon,
yeah.
Well, go ahead, Mouzon. Why don't you start? Because I think it would be a good place to go from there.
Yeah. So context wise, entrepreneur in my mind has always been like the person that assumes the risk, the person that starts the business, the person that's at the helm, right? The person that has the vision. It's their company. It's where they're headed. They're, building the team, doing the things that need to do to get the business to run, but it's on the entrepreneur, right? Like, that is the guy, the number one, right? Then you have the intrapreneur, or right, what I would call the intrapreneur is the person that doesn't want all of the risk, however, works inside of the company, inside of the business, inside of the organization, and possibly believes that they can have similar control as the entrepreneur, make changes. Again, possibly asking that question why, but going in and saying, let's do this instead of this, changing policy, right? Like, really trying to maneuver and steer that ship, even though they don't take on the risk, even though they are just inside of the organization, right? So that's my definition. Chris, tell me how that plays for you.
Yes, I think I heard a couple interesting things, and I want to kind of talk through them before I tell you my definition. One, it seems that, like, you kind of define this in terms of, like, and I'll use some kind of risque terms like power and control, right? And I'll just kind of reduce those down to ownership, right? So everybody has this concept of ownership, and it's like, entrepreneurs have to be owners, right? And I think that the biggest difference, one, I'll say it again, I think there's no difference between an entrepreneur and an intrapreneur. I think that people just like to give names to things. This all comes down to your perspective of what ownership is, right? And if you believe that you have to own the assets and the resources in order to be an entrepreneur, right? That's cool. You can believe that. That's your frame, right? But if you believe that, hey, I can own my results and I can own whatever it is that I want to accomplish using the resources that are available to me through whatever channels I have to go through, you're doing the exact same thing. An entrepreneur, my definition of an entrepreneur and intrapreneur, same thing, right? Is someone that creates something out of nothing. So you have a vision for something, right? And you're applying the principles of strategy to come up with, okay, what is this? What are we going to do here, right? You're saying, Terell said this the other day to me. He's like, oh, you know, the drive time, just hand me these checklists, and they just hand me these bigger checklists. And it was always like, okay, let's get this stuff done. But, you know, next, and he's like, I realized the next level up is like defining what needs to be done, right? And that's what an intrapreneur and entrepreneur does, is they're the ones that are defining what needs to be done in order to get to a certain place, whether that's inside an organization or outside an organization. Of course, I'll say things are less complex if you, the entrepreneur, own all of your resources that you're going to try and build capabilities off of. But if you're inside of an organization, you still have access to resources. It's just how you go about attaining those resources to put together the plan that's ultimately going to fulfill your vision.
Sure, that makes sense.
So then, well, let me ask. So then, okay, so if I hear it right, like I'm kind of listening into the conversation, right, like the fly on the wall, if you will. Chris, you said something interesting. You said defining like resources. Do you think that it is, I don't want to use the word more difficult, but do you think it can become impossible, or a company could stop entrepreneurship from happening with so much control to the
absolutely.
point of like, it can't happen?
Yep. Yeah, for sure. It's definitely it's definitely a cultural mindset. People have to believe that they can do this, that they can. Because like, right, the other thing we didn't talk about is risk, and if you define risk as what, like the downside or what you could potentially lose, right? Mm-hmm. And if you're in a culture that allows you to do this type of stuff, like in the Army, you know, I have friends in the Army that have done some really cool things, and they were telling me, they're like, oh yeah, like if we wanted to go get this thing done, we had all these resources, and we knew where the target was, and we just submitted a plan, and they were like, okay, go ahead, and we went out and did it, and like. The military calls that initiative, right? But in the business world, we call that entrepreneurship. And it all comes down to like what kind of culture do you exist in? And Terell, you and I talked about this before, like me and you, right? If like at this point in our lives, we were going to go out and find another job. We're not looking for just a job. We're looking for like a place no, I'm only going to go where I think that I can be successful at. Mm-hmm. And so if you have this entrepreneurial mindset, whether you don't want to take on the risk of payroll and all this other stuff, right? It doesn't matter. If you want to go create something out of nothing and use somebody else's framework, do it. Like that's the beauty of being here in America, is that you can do that, right? You have that choice.
Yeah, I think the thing that you said that's important, Chris, is culture. And me coming from or hearing about the traditional corporate world. That culture does not exist. And most people that are looking to make that happen in an organization, it won't happen because there's no culture there. What I've always said, or that culture of entrepreneurship or intrapreneurship, what I've always told T, and I tell everyone is, the higher up you go, at some point, even if you do take that initiative, someone can say no. And if someone can say no, like, no, I don't like that idea, or no, we can't do that, or no, we don't have the budget for that. That is the opposite of what an entrepreneur feels, because no one tells us no, right? If it is to be, it's up to me. We're going to make a way, right? If we're going to make that thing happen, we're going to make it happen. And when you're in an organization that, if you want to have, and T, we talked about this with drive time, right? Like, this is one of the big things when you get into bigger companies. It's like, I see what the issue is. I want to take initiative to go do that, but because I have to talk to the right person, go through the ranks, ask the right people, and that culture is not there, I won't make that happen. So, that's why I always said, going into, and I think we're hitting on a similar topic, that it is about the culture of the place that you're in. Yep. And I don't know, 90%, I haven't come across many, if any, corporate companies that have that culture.
Well, I mean, think about what you just said, right? You were like, I have this idea, I can see the problem, I know what to do, and then I have to go navigate it, and somebody can always tell you no, right? But like, and then you just said that entrepreneurs like, oh, nobody tells us no. Well, it's not that people don't tell us no. People tell us no all the time. I'm involved with a tech startup, and we're pre-money, and we've been working at this for over a year, and there's this illusion of like instant success, right? Or like, if you have a great idea that it comes to you. No, it doesn't work that way. No, like If somebody tells you no, it's like, okay, then what do we have to do to refine this pitch? Or what do we have to do to refine our value prop? Or who else do we have to talk to? Maybe it's just not the right fit for that person. And it's the same thing in an organization. But you have to understand like the internal politics of the organization that you're working in.
Right.
You have to be able to look out and say, or look around and say, like, how do things work here? Right? Like, how do things get done? You have to ask yourself how you get things done. And I think that people are afraid of politics. I think people hear the word politics and they freak out and they're like, oh, that's something for somebody else or whatever. I don't play politics. But yeah, you have to. If you want to get something done, that's what you have to do. And
so
I hear
even
a lot
as
of
an
people that are
entrepreneur,
like, yeah, dude, for real. Like, you got to understand your legal context and you got to understand your cultural context. Not only do you have to build a culture internally, but you have to figure, does my business interface with the culture that I'm living in? Like, there's all these considerations that you have to think about. And it's the same in an organization, right? Like, the analysis is still the same, right?
Right.
You're doing the same things. You're employing the same skills, right? You just have a different target audience and your pitch is different. Like, that's it. But if you're good at pitching, if you're a good speaker, if you're persuasive, if you're good at negotiation, if you're observant, if you understand how your organization works, like I fully believe you can get anything done.
It's tough for me. I don't like however persuasive and all those characteristics that would, again, as an entrepreneur, would definitely carry you, that can be stifled in an organization. Even if
you could rock the boat and then you just get fired.
Yeah, then you get
fired. That's your risk. You want to talk about risk? That's your risk. Your risk is that they're going to be like, yo, this guy's a problem, and they're going to get rid of you. But like, is that really a bad thing? If you're running into all those
I guess
issues,
not. Yeah, I mean,
is that really a bad thing?
I guess not. If you are really wanting to control or be the again, take ownership in the results or whatever the case is, like, I guess it's not a bad thing to get fired. But I don't think that the person with the entrepreneur mindset actually believes that, like, that's what they want to do. They just want to make change. That I don't know that they want to leave that organization. I just don't think that happens in every. I don't think that you have that really in every organization. Right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you can get held back. Yeah, absolutely. Like, you're not wrong. Like,
right.
I'm not disagreeing with you. Like, it absolutely happens. But I think, like, and Terell, we've talked about this, like, this whole growth mindset concept, right? Like, growth mindset says, okay, what did I learn from that interaction?
Right.
What did I learn from that no? You know, how can I change, right, for the next time, so that I get what I want, basically, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because, like, as I listen to you both speak about it, right, like, a concept that came to my mind is if we use a traditional framework of an entrepreneur, they look at the global economy as a marketplace for them to transact their, bring their products and services to market. Well, an employee, if we're going to say that same ownership, every company is an opportunity to do that as well. Right? Like, I think we can look at that framework. Now, you may have to have different skills for different companies, but it's the same thing. If you have a different product and service, you got to have a different skill set or knowledge base to offer it into that, particular niche of the market. So if people are looking at this, and I think really, like, a lot of times what it comes down to is, like, the entrepreneur that incurs all the risks, like, it almost comes off like they want to be differentiated. Like, no, you can't call yourself what I am. Like, you didn't take the same risk as me. Like, it's kind of like, all right, well, if I'm one, you cannot be 1B. Like, you're two. Like, it's something, like, it's almost like a pride thing. And me and Chris, this is where we kind of, like, always have fun, right? He's like, no, I put my money up. I put this up. Like, my family was at risk. Like, you got a guaranteed salary. Well, to a certain degree, right? But if something goes wrong, and it almost comes off like the entrepreneur is like, I want to differentiate, because I am taking on a financial risk that you are not taking on, and I don't have any guarantees. I try to guarantee for you. Like, what do you guys think about that thought process?
I don't know. I mean, I always believe that the entrepreneur, the person at the top, gets the final say, because it's their business, because it's their money on the line, their stuff on the line. Like, they're going to get the final say, no matter how good the idea might be of that person in your organization. You could be like, no, I don't want to go that way because I see it this way. And I don't know if that's a pride thing. I don't know if you want to take it all the way to that point, but I just believe that that's the case, right? Like, not that everybody's idea, or, you know, the people that do take ownership of their ideas in the organization, that it's not valued. But at the end of the day, somebody's got to be at the head of the ship, right? And I think that person is the person that makes the last decision. So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's just how I look at it, right? That's how I think about it.
Terell, how many final decisions do I make?
Honestly, I've been very rare. Typically, if you make a final decision, that's because we've been poorly executing on something, and it's like, all right, this is what we're going to do now, right? Like, because we've proven not to be able to navigate through the waters, and you give some direction, but it doesn't even come off like a final decision. It's like, go that way, and then you guys figure it out, right? Like, you have a saying, like you always say it, and I think I brought it up on the podcast. It's like the entrepreneur or the CEO, whoever's responsible, defines the problem and we go execute, right? They help bring clarity to defining the problem, and then we go execute on how to do it. Like, even like what I've been, it's the 13th. When did I make the change? On April 5th, right? Like, I'm 60 something days in, and there's already trust of like, okay, I trust you. Like, go do it. No, you're fine. Like, okay, thank you for telling me, go, right? You know, go utilize your resources and go solve that problem, hiring or whatever it might be. Okay, they have this issue, go. Just keep me informed, but go ahead and solve it. So I don't know if it's like I never felt like it's a final, but it is like a, here you go. Like, that's, you have the resources, but if you don't, come talk to me. I can help guide you and ask you questions. So
yeah. I think a lot of people spend a lot of time not knowing what to do. And that's the purpose of the CEO, is to define kind of the priorities to achieve that strategic objective, right? Like, CEO's job is basically like strategy and culture, right? You formulate strategy, you hire the right people to carry it out, and then you hire the right people to build the right culture. And then, like, those are your two levers, right? And as a CEO, like, those are your two levers. And like, literally, like think about it if you're a department manager, right? I would think about it in the same way. Like, I have two levers, right? I have, what strategy am I going to employ to be successful in this role? And what does my culture in this team look like? And I have control over all of those things if I'm at the right level, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about people that have that area or that scope of responsibility, right? That they can hire their own people, and that they can, you know, they're responsible for results, right? At a certain level, like, you are kind of just a worker, right? Like, you know, you're somebody that's helping to achieve company goals. You have to buy into whatever your leader's saying, but that's culture. Like, that's, like, you have to buy into whatever your department manager, whatever your director, whatever your vice president is telling you, you know, right? And if you don't buy in, like, I don't know, go somewhere else. Like, you know, when people are looking for jobs, right? Like, you know how many companies want people? You know how many companies want good people right now? Like this is jobber's market, man. Like, you can go do anything you want right now.
I
Like,
literally told that to somebody yesterday. I was like, if anyone ever comes up to me and complains about not being able to get a job, like, they are
just crazy.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. They're just being picky or whatever the case is. But
picky.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny because, like, as you talk about that, like, so let's talk about the worker, right? Because, like, a lot of people that listen to our podcast, like, they may not be in a supervisor position, right? Like, they may not, or they may be like that first level supervisor, which is just a person to ensure the directive gets the activity actually happens. So how does someone, you know, Chris D, how would you, as a CEO, how would you encourage someone, or what direction would you give them to, if they want to ultimately be able to have some more autonomy, or feel like they have more autonomy within the organization? Like, how do they navigate those waters, you know, within a company? Let's say a mid-sized company, and then we'll get to like the mega companies, because I feel like there's a different route, just me personally. But someone within a mid-sized company, small to mid-sized company, navigate that.
So I think there's like, we have to just kind of strip out some roles here, right? Like, there's some people that just don't want that. Fair. There's some people that they just like, they got something else going on. Maybe they're an actor. They like their Uber job. They like, I don't know, like they need some source of income to fuel whatever it is that they're doing. And so they're just going to come just to like put in time and get a paycheck, and that's it, right? And so like, this kind of conversation really isn't for them.
Yep.
The principle that I'll say will apply to them, but they don't really care. the people that this would be of interest to are the people that are enterprising, that do want to move up or have some goals, or they want to achieve something, or they have some purpose, right? Or some sense of purpose. And I would say that if you're at a level in an organization, if you're an individual contributor, or if you're like kind of like an entry level person, like the best thing that you can do is just figure out how every day to show up and be enthusiastic and be engaged. Like whatever you got to do to get yourself into that headspace, and just show up and be involved. And like, that's probably 85% of it.
Wow. Now, I did not think you're going to say that. So this is the first, like we've talked a lot, but like, think about that. What skill, like, well, let me ask, is it a skill to get yourself in that headspace every day?
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell me more about your thought process around, like, how could somebody do that maybe in an environment, let's say they do like their job, like, but they struggle with that. Like, what would you recommend they do, or some things that they can do?
I think that everybody could benefit, no matter who you are, could benefit from being more reflective on your experiences. Like, and it doesn't matter how you do this, right? Like, you could just lay in bed in the morning and think about your day before, or whatever, right? Or you could write it down. You could have these big journals and stuff, whatever you want to do. But I think that there's a like, I think most people just kind of like they just kind of move through life, and they don't think about like where they are in time and space, and how they're showing up. And Chris, I'll go back to this concept of ownership, right? Like, there's millions of people out there that just don't take ownership for the things that happen to them.
Yep.
Right? And if we go back a step further, one, you have to be willing to take ownership for the things that happen to you. Like bad stuff can happen to you, right? Bad stuff happened to me, bad stuff happened to people I know. But you have to ask yourself on some level, what behaviors did I do that contributed to this bad things happening to me? Right? Like, I got lung cancer. Well, why did I get lung cancer? We smoked for 25 years. Like, you know, like what behaviors did you do to contribute, right? Sometimes you just get into a car accident, right? But were you driving really fast? Were you being unsafe? Like, and nobody wants to take ownership from that. Like, people hate having to like self-examine. And so it's really hard to do this, right? But if you can get over the fear of like what you'll find, you know, like you'll start thinking about things differently. And it's not even about becoming a leader, becoming a CEO, becoming an entrepreneur. It's just about like your perspective about your world will change. And you'll start thinking about like, oh, wow, what am I doing? Like, am I around people that I really want to be around? What am I getting out of this? Right? What am I getting out of this relationship? Am I able to give to this relationship? Do those people respect me? Like, you know what I mean? Like, these are all like basic things, you know what I mean? And these aren't even aspirational things. They're just like people just in bad situations just simply have to ask themselves, like, why am I here? How did I get here? Right? And like, nobody does that.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Chris, because like what you're hitting on, I often say is the entrepreneurial mindset, right? There's a mindset behind taking ownership of your life, of the things that are happening around you, and knowing that you can control those things, right? And I think that's, you know, when I get into debates with people of like, everyone can't be an entrepreneur, like we need workers. I'm like, but everyone can have a mindset of the entrepreneur. Everyone can have the mindset of being the owner of their own life and controlling their destiny. And I think that's what you're saying. That's a big differentiator between the worker, the person that comes in and just is kind of the drifter and just kind of flows through life and flows through the job and just kind of does their thing, not paying attention to where they are and what's happening, versus, call it the entrepreneur, doesn't matter, right? Like now the person that takes ownership and says, no, I want to be here. This is what I think, right? I think there's really, and you talk about that growth mindset versus fixed mindset, right? Big thing that I, you know, love talking about also, because knowing that like wherever you start is not where you have to be, right? Continuing to know that you will evolve and learn and grow. And I think a lot of times when the worker comes in and works at a job, they take like everything becomes autopilot. like everything, because they're
My checklist.
Yeah, right. Well, because they're, and I think it's tied to their income, right? I really think, because I didn't give you much of my background, but like I worked in restaurants, so culinary degree, I was back of the house for a little bit of time, jumped front of the house. My last position, I was the AGM with Cheesecake Factory, right? Did that for 5.5 years or whatever the case is. But what I always knew was that, like, when your check is automated, when your money is relatively automated, it's going to come in, it causes you to think less about the other areas of your life. I really believe that. It wasn't until I broke out and I started to have to fend for myself, right? Go make money, be on commission, that side, that I really started to take full ownership of my life. Like, okay, well, now I really can't do this. I can't go out. I can't do these things because I need to go make money. And that, when I got detached from having a check, is when my mindset changed. And I think because, talked about this a bunch, as we get groomed into being workers, as we get groomed into being, right, just the employee, that things are very automated and very standard for you, that you lose control of the rest of your life, of the things that you want to do. Now, taking 1 or 2 vacations a year becomes the thing, right? It just becomes this kind of standard life. And I think that we can all develop that entrepreneurial mindset, even if you're not an entrepreneur, even if you're working in a company. I think it really, right, you can change those things. A lot of it, I think, is attached to the check that people get.
It's interesting. And I guess in a lot of ways, it's kind of the opposite of how I view things. Like I think that like when people have kind of a base level of security, right, they're able to focus on things like developing their mindset. They're able to focus on developing other areas of their life because they're not worried about, they're like out of like scarcity mode. They're out of survival mode, right? If you're just constantly living in survival mode, like you're not going to get anything done.
I get, like, honestly, Chris, like just like most people still live in survival mode because, I'm in the financial world too now. So 80% of people live paycheck to paycheck.
Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that keeps you in scarcity. That keeps you in a place of like, I don't know when, right, like how I can make another move unless this check keeps coming in. And I think it causes people to not think about the other side, right? Like,
okay, well, like, so as humans, right, I love talking about this. This is a totally different subject, but we can go down.
It's all good.
Yeah, please, I told you we were going to go.
This is what we do.
so like, I love artificial intelligence. I love it for all the right reasons, and I understand that like it could all end very badly.
Sure,
right?
The robots will kill us one day.
Yeah, right. Like, it could all end very, very badly. But you got to think about humans, right? Humans are on this planet, and I'm not going to speculate, and I'm not going to say that I speculate, but just here in our known world,
sure,
humans are able to do things that like no other creature can do, right? How many inputs do you get every single day? Billion inputs?
Yeah.
Like every nuance of color, everything is an input. You're being bombarded by inputs, visual, sensory, like all day long, 24 hours a day, nonstop, right? So like imagine for a second that you lived in an apartment and all of your neighbors, like you were on a kind of a middle unit, and the neighbor above you, the one to the right, the one to the left, and the one below you, all listen to different types of music at volume 12 all day long, right? Like, how would you feel? Tell me how you would feel. You'd be like,
yeah, you'd go crazy.
You're out of your mind, right? So this is what happens to the brain. This is the brain's constantly being bombarded by inputs, and it picks and chooses the inputs that it allows to process actively, and it filters out the rest of it. And so what you're talking about is people form these maps for how they go about their lives. And one of the best ways to illustrate this is, did you ever like drive somewhere and you like get to where you're going and you're like,
how'd I get here? I haven't been paying attention at all. Yeah.
How did I get here? But somehow you got there safely. It's because you have a mental map built in your head that's so good that it allows you to completely tune out all of the other inputs and just arrive at your destination because your map's so good. And so people that are workers that have that have like a steady paycheck or whatever, right? They develop these maps. they develop these maps about their lives, 2 vacations a year, PTO, kids soccer games, weekends, taking kids to the park, like, you know, and then their jobs, right? And these, like, we're talking about individual contributors, lower level people, like they're there to work a process, right? Like they have tasks that they have to get done, and it's in a lot of ways repetitive, right? So the brains just put all this stuff on autopilot, and because the longer they do it, the more that map becomes ingrained into their system, right? And then they're unable to, or because they're disengaged basically, and they're just kind of going through this loop, it's impossible for them to change it. And think about it this way, like, what's the last thing you really learned how to do well?
Think about it. Yeah, like, I'm still learning, so now I can't take it.
So I was when I was a kid, my father was a hunter, and so he taught me how to shoot, right, like rifles and stuff like that. Yeah. And I was in the military, and we did some shooting and things like that. And maybe like a year ago, I was like, oh, I think I want to get back into shooting. And I'd never really shot any pistols before. And so I had a friend, and he started showing me. Do you know how hard it is to shoot pistols well? Like, do you know how hard it is? It is incredibly hard to use a handgun. Yeah. And like, when I first started, like, so much of my brain power and so much of my energy was going towards, what are the steps? How am I doing all the steps properly? Am I doing them all properly every single time? Am I getting the result that I want? And the self-evaluation, like this learning process, just over and over and over again. Yeah. Dude, that's hard. Like, I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's pistol shooting. I don't care if it's shiny shoes. I don't care if it's like whatever. Like that process is hard. Yeah. And people don't like Goggins is famous for saying, like, you don't want to be around that guy that pushes you, right? Mm-mm. Because people like being in their mental maps. They like the security, right? It's like the Matrix, right? They like the security of just they know that, like, there's no surprises. They're just on autopilot. They're just doing their thing. And they're checked out, and then they go for 40 years doing this, and all of a sudden it's like talking heads. They're like, "How did I get here?" Exactly.
So then,
what is that large automobile?
Yeah, well, say, as you said, like, just kind of go back to the start, because I think this is gold. Like, we always, like, on the podcast, whenever something like really important is said, we want to like highlight it just to make sure we're good. You talked about like showing up every day enthusiastic, and then we talked about like breaking your own like map, if you will, right? It's kind of like, you know how to get to work, but then you go to work in a different direction. So now you got to think about like, all right, what's that street that connects to this street that gets me ultimately to where I want to go? Like, this is the type of things that we, as all of us, right, are trying to do. The entrepreneur is thinking about, well, how do I break into this new market? Or how do I secure more space within this market? Or what new products or services, or what's coming down the road, right? Whether, politically or economically down the road. But even as us, as just, people within the workspace, whatever place we're in, we have to constantly show up with enthusiasm, but also be willing to break the map that got us to that point. And that is like hard. That does take time. Like, look, me and Chris talk about it. Like, I was in autopilot in middle management at a large company. I can get my job done in 3.5 hours of an 8-hour shift a day. Wake up at 9, get on the computer at 9:30. By 12:30, I would have my day locked and loaded outside of any ancillary meeting that was, that was just out there. And that includes going to a store and back home, right? You want something different for your life. You take ownership. You got to be willing to break it. Like, I had a family member tell me I was crazy for wanting to do something more once I figured out autopilot, 6 figures a year, and I could just like navigate my way potentially to the top, or just stay where I was at because it was so comfortable. Like, they're sitting on a job. They're like, I got 3-4 more years. It took me forever to get to this in retirement. They're like, I got 3-4 more years and I'm out. Like, so I'm just going to sit back, put my feet up, and just, I'm on retirement. I finally got to that place. You got it early. You can do 20 years of this. You're crazy. Yeah. And literally, like, I've had family say this.
I know, because again, they're in that mindset. And go back to, like, again, the original topic of the entrepreneur, how many people inside of an organization have that mindset versus the ownership mindset, right? Like there's going to be such a select few inside of every organization, if any, that have the mindset of, I want to keep progressing. I want to change. I want to take ownership of this because, and this is what I was saying, I really think it goes back to that check that you're connected to, that security that you're connected to. You're not taking on any risk, and it lulls you to sleep. It lulls you to sleep the more that you're that worker, right?
Yeah,
and
people want to, I think people want to assume as little risk as possible. Like as much as they say that they're like risk takers, like, yeah, you're right. Like people want a relatively safe existence, right? Yeah. Like this is what people want. But
not the entrepreneur, the person with the entrepreneur mindset, typically.
Oh, no, I want to be safe. Like I like feeling safe. Like totally. Like I'm like, but you don't like just wake up one day and like, you're like, oh, I'm going to go take on all the risk in the world. No, like you got to build up to that. Like it's a skill, just like anything else. Like you have to develop that, like that risk-taking ability, and you can do it. You can learn how to do anything. Like it comes down to like, you have to decide, and only you can decide. And that's the important part. Yeah. Nobody else can decide this for you. And I don't care what anybody says, only you can decide this. Right. You got to sit down and you got to decide what it is that you want. And if you can decide, if you can come to that conclusion, and for real, right? Because a lot of times you can do this exercise and be wrong, and that's cool. Just keep doing it. But if you can do this exercise and you can sit down and you can say to yourself, okay, what do I want? What do I really want? Right? And then you say, okay, what do I have to do to get it? And now you start working towards that. And you start looking at your life and you say, okay, this is what I want. Now, if you're in an organization and that organization wants the same things that you want, if your values are the same, you have similar missions, it's good alignment. You're probably going to be successful in that place, right? If you say, what do I want? And then you look at your situation and you say, wait a minute, what am I doing here? Like this place is bureaucratic and rigid and inflexible, and I need creative space, and like, what am I doing, right? And these are hard questions, right? Because sometimes people like they're 40 and they're like, wait, I've been doing the wrong thing my whole life.
Yeah. But they had that realization. I don't think, and you hit the nail on the head, Chris. Like I tell people this all the time. You have to figure out what you want. It's the first step.
Yeah.
And people don't take that step to say, what is it that I actually want? Most people literally just want to be comfortable, right? When I sit down with people on a financial base, right? Like, and I try to help them, and that is overwhelming the majority of what people say as their goal is to just be comfortable. I just want a house. I want a place to live. I want to be okay financially so I can do some of the things that I want to do.
Base level. The base level of security.
Right.
They want to be one level above insecurity, right?
Exactly.
Like they just want to get out of scarcity and just be out of scarcity. Like that's it. But the magic part is that once you realize that, like, wait a minute, I want to be like, maybe material acquisition is important to you, right? Like maybe you want to have 4 houses and a Lambo and like whatever. Like I don't know, like. Maybe that's important to you. And so you set those material things as goals. You say, okay, what do I got to do to get those things? Well, you better have multiple income streams or a really high paying job. Like, like, but what if you say like, oh, I want to impact as many people as I can with my message or to help people unlock their things. Well, maybe you go be a teacher, right? Like because there's reward in that. Like entrepreneurship isn't just a business term. Like it just describes anybody that understands what they want and take steps to make something out of nothing. And at the end of the day, that's leadership, right? Leadership is just self-expression. You've figured out what you want and you need resources to do it. And you know what, sometimes the resources you need are a lot of people. Sometimes the resources you need are a lot of capital. And there's only like a couple ways to get that. You either build it or you buy it. So if you don't have any money, then you're gonna go have to organize people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like this is the only way. This is how stuff gets done.
Right.
And this is how stuff got done, thousands of years ago.
Forever. Yeah.
Everywhere.
Forever.
It's 2 skills, right? So I in my head, like both of you guys know I say it all the time, like I have to process and simplify everything, like till I can like teach it to my 4-year-old. Like this is the way my brain works. And I'm like, if there's two skills that I have to have, number one is my ability to be able to articulate myself, whether written or verbal, in an influential way. And then if I can have that skill and I'm at a very high level, I can kind of process through life pretty well. I can stay above scarcity. But then if I take on the ability to be able to lead people and galvanize the troops and get everybody to go that direction, then like I can take myself even one more step above, like out of scarcity. And it's like these two skills, like that's transferable no matter what you do. And this kind of like opened my eyes. Like when I was at Drive Time, like on my last year, we had like this I don't know, psychologist, but like person come in, kind of go through like your skill sets. And like she was processing through my stuff and she's like, man, you must have you must be really feeling good that day. Like all your scores are like through the charts. And I was like, yeah, I'm usually pretty good every day. And she's like, you know, based on what you have here, and after talking to you, she goes, you can do this anywhere. You just have to learn the skill. And the light switch clicked on for me, because sometimes I think people get trapped, right? Like a part of this whole conversation, like I'm good at this. I'm scared to take the risk of that because I don't have those skill sets. But you're taking all of the foundation skill sets with you, right? Like I remember the conversation, like, so that was a pivotal moment. And then right after that, me and Chris and our families are having a barbecue, Mouzon, at his house. And I'm like, Chris, I think I gotta go. Like I'm looking out and I have skills. I realize these skills. And Chris goes, and Mouzon says, you know, you should probably just go to a smaller company. And I was like, so for me, it was freaking out. I was like, hold up, insecurity, security, smaller company. I was like, big company don't want to pay, smaller company pay less, right? Right? Like that was my process. But he's like, no, like take the skills. And I remember Mouzon, I remember left that day, I was like, you know what, let me think about a smaller company. And maybe that allows me to do all these things that I can take with me and I can expand, because I found value outside of just money. I found value in being able to create value and be able to work these skills, value in being able to the ownership I wanted to take and show. And thus 6 months later or whatnot, I get the call and I'm like, hell yeah, let's have this conversation, right? And the rest is history. So I really want to put that out there because people are afraid of taking the risk. Even sometimes they realize they have the skill set, but it's going with you. Right? Like you can learn all the other ancillary stuff. If you can communicate effectively, you can do the mental gymnastics, right? That it takes to kind of process through things and learn it, like with the pistol shooting, and you can take that with you. You can be successful wherever you are, whether you own it or you just own your part in it, however you want to take it, it's all yours. So I did want to put that out there because I just went through this process from comfort to what people can say insecure, like there's, you know, some security risk going on, but it still works. I feel safer where I am today. And I don't think, Chris, I don't think I ever said, I feel safer today than in the machine where I had years of experience and years of accolades, but I feel safer because I'm actually working my gift. I wasn't working my gift there. I was an autopilot. So at any point it could have shut off the switch and I was like, I don't have anything to show because you know, I was shifted there. So I did want to put that out there for everybody that's hearing this and encourage, like, I don't know if I can do this, but I do want people to know you can. You just got to be willing to go through that process. So.
And it's good that you said that, T, because again, back to when you guys did come over and we were having that conversation, I was listening to what you said fulfilled you. Yes. It was no longer security of some corporate position. That was not what fulfilled you. It was making change, making an impact, right? Being able to let your voice be heard, you know, fostering a culture of people, helping people, right? Like I was listening to what it was. That's why I was like, well, you got to go somewhere where you can actually do that. And we've talked about going doing it yourself, right? And that's a little too far. That was a little too far for where you were with your family. And I was like, okay, well, if you're not going to go all the way on that side, then find a smaller company where they give you some control, where you can go in and you can actually navigate. And that's what you found. So, you know, again, people normally they're just scared of the unknown. They're scared of the unknown. They're scared of the change. They're scared of all of those things. Again, entrepreneur mindset says, right, like I believe in myself. I believe in my abilities. I believe I'll navigate and figure it out. Even if it's not the first try, it might be the second company or the third one, but regardless, I'm going to figure this out. And I don't know that people have that belief in themselves. I don't know that people have fostered that belief or are in environments that foster that belief in themselves. So, you know, but that's what you had. So, you know, kudos.
Well, people don't want to like, I think I told this story before, like, you know, I give my motivational speeches, and like people always like, Terell, you're like trying to be Tony Robbins like at work. And I'm like, I know, like one day, like who knows, right? And I said, but it's good, right? And like, I love it. It's just, you know, they're like, you're not gonna be here long with this. But I remember giving like this like real like inspirational talk. I was all hyped up for it. And then like later that day, I had somebody come to me and was like, Terell, that was like one of the best speeches, whatever I've ever heard. And you finally gave me the motivation I needed. Here goes my 2 weeks notice. I was like, oh, like, what are you talking about?
You've achieved your goal. Like you inspired action. Like that's what all you're trying to do is you're trying to create a situation where you inspire action. Like I wake up every day and I'm like, how do I inspire action in people?
Yes.
And so you did it, right? But you're associating like people giving their 2 week notice is like we've had people leave over the last couple of weeks, you know, like they're going to find themselves, and we're like, all right, like, you know, I guess we've done our jobs here because you feel good enough to go out and self-actualize. So yay, win for us, right? And,
yes.
And like, you know, in a lot of ways, like that's, you know, kind of the purpose. Like, you know, I think that everybody needs to have a purpose. And back to AI, AI is going to remove a lot of people's purpose. And you know, people don't necessarily need money. Like, yeah, they do, right? They need some way to live. Really, people need purpose. And as leaders, like that's what we do. We give people purpose. We define context. We allow them to be the best version of themselves. We allow them to self-actualize. We give them the safety net. Now, other business leaders probably believe things differently, right? But I believe that if we create an environment where people can feel like they can come and be their best version of themselves, that ultimately you're going to get a really great company. And really great companies, people want to do business with. And it's, you know, yeah, you can be a hardcore capitalist and you can be like, no, it's all about the numbers and it's all about X, Y, and Z. But at the end of the day, like if you're in a business like ours where you need people to get things done, right? You don't need people that are on autopilot. You don't want people that are on autopilot. You want people that are thinking, okay, how can I get better at serving the customers? How can I get better at doing my job? You want those people in that mindset. And that's one of the most difficult things to try and inspire in people is how to get them to think. And Terell, you had a really good story the other day about one of the guys that works for you, and you were on a ride along with him, and he was like, you know, totally like had this framework of like how he was going to get something done. And you were like, you know, if you would have done X, Y, and Z, like you would have been right there. We'd probably be doing this job. And what did he say to you? He said, you know, hindsight's 20/20.
He was like hindsight's 20/20.
but that goes back to reflectiveness, right? Like if the one thing that guy takes from that conversation is that he's going to start thinking about every service call that he went on, dude, that's a win, man. Like you've impacted somebody, like you've changed somebody's life, right? And like, what's that going to do? Like, is he viewed as a leader within the organization? If he is, then other people are going to see the things that he does, and they're going to start doing, oh, good for him. Like, you know, I'm going to start doing it too. And then the culture starts to change, right? And it goes from everybody being in their own little boxes to people saying like, okay, well, how can I really best contribute here? And are you going to see some people self-select and be like, yeah, this isn't for me? Yeah, of course. Because like Chris said, like people want security. They want that safety of that map, right? So it's not for everybody. Right. But I think that given the right conditions, I think that if you set the right stage, if you try and build the right culture, people are going to be attracted to that. Because I think more people want to do that than don't want to do it.
Sure. How do you incentivize? This is a question for you, Chris. How do you incentivize thinking and action? Right. Like, how do you incentivize it? How do you, right? Because everyone has their own triggers and emotional or, you know, things that they want. How do you incentivize? Like, I want you to think. I want you to take action. I want you to do those things.
I think you have to understand what people's motivations are, and you have to try and provide rewards that fit within that motivation scheme. And like, you know, the word incentivize kind of implies some kind of monetary reward. And I just, at this point in my life, I don't think that everything has to be incentivized. Like, I think there has to be incentives, but people just kind of associate this word incentives with like monetary incentives.
Right.
But like, if you think about it from like an economic standpoint, like people act in their best interest, right? Like rational people act in their best interest. There's two key words there. One, rational. right? And then self-interest, right? And so that implies that they have to think about what they want and then take action, right? and unfortunately, there's just a lot of irrational people out there. But if you take, the law of averages, and you say most, on average, people are going to be rational about how they approach things. If you can communicate with them effectively, right, you can create a situation where you let people see that, yeah, they can take those risks, right? And I think that people in the right situation, like if you were in the right environment and you would take those risks to be able to fulfill whatever vision it is and create whatever movement you wanted to create. And in a sense, working in corporations, we're all like little revolutionaries.
Right.
Yeah. And that's like, the word control keeps coming up in my mind. Like, Chris Donnelly, like, you're not a controlling guy, right? Like, you're not controlling, but you're in control. And I think a lot of leaders, a lot of times feel like, do this, do that, do this. It's like people aren't inherently going to want to do their best. And you take a different approach. And this is like for somebody, all the people that are trying to start their own business or one day are over, like, inherently people do want to do good. Like, people want to do their best. They're just afraid to try and fail, right? Like, you know what I mean?
You just hit the word I was
right.
Gonna say.
Like, they're just afraid to try and fail. But if you can encourage them that failure is a part of the process, right? And failure actually represents you tried, which is what I want you to do. If we can create that environment, we'll have people knocking on our doors like, hey, I got an idea, or hey, I got this. So full disclosure, like, I've been like a nag at work like the last 2 weeks, I feel like, on a topic, which is like, hey, or like the last week, we're like, are we incentivizing people right? Like, are we paying people right? Like, so we've been talking about it. Like, what are people's motivations, right? Like, and I'm like, I'm really curious about this. Like, and so like I write it out loud on the board. And I'm like, hey, did you see my board?
Do you understand that you're doing it? You're doing what we're talking about.
Yes.
Like we spent a lot of time trying to hire the right person for your role, and clearly we got it right, like, right? Because you're doing the very things that we're talking about, right? Like, I'm not some like overlord that's like, we have to go do this, right? And this is one of the things that I said about one of the guys that I interviewed this week, is that do this, do this, do this, do this. And then it's like, yay, like you did it, right? Like you did it. And you're trying to get people to do that. But if you're locked into that, like do this power and control set, like you're not allowing people to self-express, right? And so dude, like you're doing exactly what we're talking. You're being an entrepreneur, right? By bringing up those subjects. If I ever once told you no, hey, no, we're not doing that. No, like there's always a better way to do something, right? There's always a better way to get something done. And that's the power of perspective, to wrap this up, right? That's the power of perspective, right? And so if you bring people with varying perspectives and differing experiences, and as long as they can communicate with each other, right? And you just let them come up with like, dude, here's the problem. This is what we're facing. This is what's stopping us from being successful. What should we do about it?
Yeah.
Like, do I have my own thoughts, Terell? Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I have my own thoughts, right? Yes. Are my thoughts or my ideas the best ideas? No, they're not. Not always, right? And sometimes they are. Like, I'm a knower, right? So like, I always believe that like my ideas are the best.
Oh, Chris and Chris, you guys should be friends.
so like, dude, my ideas my ideas are always the best ideas. Totally, right? But no, they're not. And like, they're ill-informed, and sometimes they're made on emotion and like all this other stuff. So one of the skills, one of the practice that I have to do is like, no, like, so, okay, don't trample on other people's ideas. Let people speak, right? Like, actually listen to what people are saying, because like, I take the approach of like, I sit here and I listen to you guys. What do these guys know that I don't know? And then when you get this kind of stuff happening, right? That's when the magic happens, man. Like, you want to bring things to life. Very rarely do people bring things to life on their own. Like Thomas Edison, right? You think he sat in his basement and invented the light bulb and like, just doing solo experiments? No, he had like a huge budget every year, and he had like 150 employees, and they worked tirelessly around the clock for like 4 years to try and invent the light bulb, right? Like, Like, no, you have to be able to have, you have to have a purpose. And to have a purpose, you have to know what you want.
Yeah.
When you have a purpose, right, and you know what you want, and you know how to get there, and you understand that you need other people to do it, then your perspective changes, and you say like, okay, what do I need people to do? Who do I need to help me with this, right? And in my case, one of the people I need to help me is I need somebody to translate all of the nebulous stuff that comes out of my head. Right? So
yeah, we're the filters. We're the filters.
How do you help me every single day?
Yeah, I simplify it and give it. Simplify it and give it.
I remember, and this will wrap it up. I remember hearing the story of Howard Schultz for Starbucks, and he said they would have never gotten anywhere had he not brought on, I think his name was Oren, last name Oren or something like that to organize all of his thoughts. He's like, I'm just rambling about coffee all the time and all my ideas. He's like, and if I didn't have this guy, we wouldn't be Starbucks. So
yes, there's like, nobody can do it alone. Yeah. Right. Like who's another really good example of this? You guys know the Red Hot Chili Peppers, LA back in the 90s. So Anthony Kiedis is the lead singer, and he pays someone to full time follow him around and record everything that he says. And then they go back and they listen to it and they use it to write lyrics.
Wow.
Like,
I think you saw me that story once. Yeah.
Like, there's just like, sometimes like, dude, like you've heard me talk. Like sometimes I'm like crazy. I'm like I tell my wife, I'm like, these people must think I'm like a wizard or something. Like I just like come up with stuff. I'm like yapping and like, everybody's like, yeah, okay. And, you know, and I'm just really analytical. So like, I tend to explain things in analytical form. Right. But not everybody receives information like that. So Terell helps me by translating some of that stuff, because he understands that stuff, but then he also understands like how to simplify things that I don't understand how to simplify. Right? Like there's some things that like you can simplify that I'm like, good job.
Sounds great.
Like with Joe, like with Joe, like there's things that I've been telling Joe for years, right? That you've gotten him to buy into in like one conversation. And I'm like, I don't know how he does it, but good go. Like whatever.
That's it. That's awesome. So
this has been good. This has been good. Chris, you're gonna have to be a yearly contributor to the podcast. Absolutely. I'm gonna have to steal a couple hours of your time every year, because this, like, I get it every day. Yeah. Like I said, like part of the 25% of the reason why I took the job was because I get to sit down with you for at least 1 hour a week, because you have to give me a one-on-one time, right? And we could just do this over and over. But we really appreciate you, like, truly coming on the podcast. I know our listeners are going to, really enjoy this, because like every day, this is what we do, right? Like we think it's this big fancy thing, but it's really like, what do you want and how do you get there, right? And then working with people, like of all of us, like figuring out how to push the sand one direction together. And it really simplifies that. And I think that's a good place to end, as we always give our final thoughts. Like, it's not as like grandioso as the media presents it to be, or the guy on Instagram, like, come listen to my cool stuff. Like, I got my Lambo because I'm super smart. No, like, I don't even know if they still do that. Do they do that, Chris? I don't even think.
I think so. I don't know. I don't follow it if they do.
It's not that. It's the grassroots things of like knowing yourself, owning yourself, and then helping get other people to follow a clear direction, but then also trusting that they have the answers. Right? It's not just you, like they have answers too, and we can all build it together. Like Chris D said, I help translate some things and simplify it. Great. And then he helps define problems for me that I can get caught in the minutia of like making it work. And he defines a problem and makes me open up in a way that I didn't think about, because I'm so like, hey, let's hit the number, because that's how I've been like wired. So we kind of work together and process together. And this is, so you guys are seeing a company literally on the podcast, two people in leadership, the leader and somebody else in leadership, processing things and giving you this insight that you may not otherwise get. So thank you, Chris and Oliver, for coming on and being willing to do that, because nobody else from other places ever wanted to come on. So
yeah,
so I appreciate it. So I that's my final thought.
In closing, I guess, like, we've been talking a lot about leadership and about, influence and all these other things. And I'll just say again, and I think I said it before, like, it's okay. Like if like you can go through this process and you can understand that, like, all right, so I don't want these big things, right? Like you may want something that's really small, And that's what makes you happy. And that's the important part, is that you go through that process and you just understand what it is that you want and who you are. And just doing that, right, will help you get to where you want to be. And that doesn't matter where it is. Like, not everybody wants to be, the CEO. Not everybody wants to be, driving a Lambo. Like, not everybody wants those things. And we have to recognize that. But this is applicable to everybody. If you just do those two things, right? If you just understand what you want and you understand yourself, like, you're going to live a happier life. And you're going to be able to show up and be more engaged in things with your family, with your friends, with everything, because you're not constantly on autopilot. And for nothing else, if you just go through that process and understand those things and understand what you want, your life's going to change dramatically.
Mouzon, wrap us up. Take us home.
1,000% agree with both you gentlemen, and I think that is the main point that we just want to get across. Like, figure out what you want. Once you figure out what you want, everything else actually will fall into place, right?
Yeah.
Whether the entrepreneur, intrapreneur, worker, whatever it is, just figure out what you want, and then you'll start to define a little bit more of your day-to-day actions, or where you're headed. So Chris, we definitely appreciate you jumping on, and for everybody that's listening, again, hit T and I up. We want to hear your perspective, right? Send us a message, let us know what your thoughts are on this topic, because again, life is not about right or wrong. It's just about your perspective. It's just about how you see things. That's what we get a chance to do on this podcast, is just hear other perspectives. You take it in, you take in this information so that you can then go apply it. You can do whatever you want with it, but just understand that your perspective, other perspectives absolutely matter. They absolutely matter in, the direction of your life. So until next week, guys, we're signing off. T, say goodbye.
Bang, bang. Because I'll let you know, it's a thing we have. Like,
it's a thing we just started, but either way, we're gonna rock.
Everything's got to start somewhere.
Gotta start somewhere, guys. Until next week, signing off. Perspective Podcast. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Perspective Podcast. We hope this conversation made you think a bit deeper, gain some insight, or even possibly gain a brand new perspective. If you did enjoy it, do us a favor, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, Anchor, or anywhere else you stream. Leave a review to help more people experience these conversations and potentially change their perspective as well. And lastly, as always, T and I want you to connect with us. So follow us on Facebook, on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter. You can find us just by using our names. And there we get a chance to hear your perspective. Until next time, God bless.